screwed by his own bank? This just got ugly, and he's not backing down. Donald Trump has announced a lawsuit against JPMorgan Chase, claiming the financial giant deliberately debanked him after the January 6th Capitol riot. Supporters call it financial censorship, critics insist it's risk management, but either way, the clash between Trump and Wall Street is heating up fast. Debanked by Wall Street, that's the charge Trump is leveling, and it raises questions about whether banks can punish political figures or simply protect their reputation. The bank war begins here, and this fight could reshape the relationship between politics, finance, and free speech in America. Stay with us as we break down the timeline, the implications, and the ripple effects of this explosive case. Before diving deeper, let's clarify what debanking means. It's when a financial institution closes or restricts someone's accounts, often citing risk, compliance, or reputational concerns. For everyday people, it might mean losing access to credit cards or savings. For political figures, it raises questions about fairness and freedom. After the Capitol riot, several corporations and banks reassessed their ties to Trump and his businesses. Reports suggest JP Morgan was among those institutions that quietly distanced themselves. This wasn't announced with press releases. It was subtle, but it set the stage for today's lawsuit. Trump argues that JP Morgan's decision wasn't about policy, but politics. He says the bank targeted him because of his role in January 6th. Supporters echo this, calling it financial censorship. Critics, however, insist banks have the right to protect themselves from reputational damage. On the other side, JP Morgan maintains that account closures follow internal compliance rules. They argue it's about risk management, not political bias. From quiet account closures in 2021 to Trump's public lawsuit in 2026, this conflict has been building for years. Each step, from media leaks to legal filings, adds fuel to the fire. And beyond Trump, this case could set a precedent for how banks treat future leaders and public figures. Trump's lawsuit against JP Morgan isn't just a financial dispute, it's a political signal. Every move he makes is watched closely in Washington, and this case could influence how lawmakers think about the power of banks in political controversies. Supporters argue this is proof that institutions are punishing him for his politics. They frame it as financial censorship, warning that if it can happen to a president, it could happen to anyone who challenges the system. Critics insist JP Morgan was simply protecting itself. They argue banks have the right to cut ties with clients who pose reputational risks, and that this isn't about politics, it's about business survival. This lawsuit also touches on free speech debates. Supporters see account closures as silencing political voices, while critics say financial institutions aren't obligated to provide platforms. The tension between free expression and corporate autonomy is at the heart of this case. With Trump back in the spotlight, this lawsuit adds fuel to ongoing debates about his influence. Whether he wins or loses, the case will be used by both sides to argue about fairness, accountability, and political power in America. And beyond Trump, this case could set a precedent for future leaders, shaping how banks interact with politics for years to come. At the heart of this case is how banks manage risk. Financial institutions like JP Morgan constantly evaluate clients for reputational, legal, and compliance concerns. When a client becomes politically controversial, banks face tough choices: protect their brand or risk backlash. Banks don't just handle money, they handle trust. Investors, regulators, and customers expect them to avoid scandal. Cutting ties with high-profile figures can be seen as protecting that trust. But critics argue this creates a dangerous precedent, where reputation outweighs fairness. Trump isn't the first public figure to face account closures. Over the years, activists, controversial celebrities, and even nonprofits have reported being debanked. Each case raises the same question: are banks acting on policy or politics? For Wall Street, the challenge is balancing profit with risk. Trump's businesses were once lucrative clients, but controversy changes the equation. JP Morgan's decision highlights how banks weigh financial gain against potential fallout, a calculation that could affect anyone in the public eye. If Trump's lawsuit succeeds, banks may face stricter rules on account closures. That could reshape how financial institutions operate, potentially limiting their autonomy. If JP Morgan wins, it reinforces the idea that banks can act independently, even when politics are involved. Either outcome has ripple effects across the economy. This case isn't just about one man or one bank. It's about the intersection of finance and politics in America. When banks make decisions that affect political figures, they influence public debate. Trump's lawsuit shines a spotlight on how deeply financial institutions are woven into the fabric of democracy. Major outlets like Reuters, the New York Times, and CNN have reported on Trump's lawsuit with a focus on the legal details. They highlight JP Morgan's defense as risk management and frame the case as part of Trump's broader legal battles. Meanwhile, alternative and independent outlets often frame the story differently. Some portray Trump as a victim of political targeting, arguing that banks are acting as silent enforcers of establishment power. These narratives resonate with audiences who already distrust large institutions, and they add fuel to debates about fairness and free speech. On platforms like Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube, the lawsuit has sparked heated debates. Supporters share clips calling it financial censorship, while critics argue Trump is using the courts to stay in the spotlight. Hashtags like No Debanked and No Trump vs JP Morgan trend, showing how quickly financial disputes can become cultural flashpoints. Polls and surveys suggest Americans are split. Some see Trump's lawsuit as a fight for fairness, while others view it as another distraction from larger issues. This division mirrors the broader polarization in U.S. politics, where even financial disputes become partisan talking points. Political and financial analysts caution against oversimplifying the case. They note that banks often act conservatively to avoid risk, but they also acknowledge that targeting high-profile figures can appear political. Analysts suggest the outcome could influence both public trust in banks and Trump's political narrative heading into 2026. What's clear is that this lawsuit has momentum. Each new filing, statement, or leak keeps the story alive in the media cycle. For Trump, that means staying in headlines. For JP Morgan, it means defending its reputation. And for viewers, it means another chapter in the ongoing clash between politics and finance. This lawsuit isn't just about Trump or JP Morgan. It's about the intersection of politics, finance, and free speech in America. When banks make decisions that affect political figures, they influence public debate. And that raises questions about accountability and fairness. If Trump wins, banks may face stricter rules on account closures. If JP Morgan wins, it reinforces their autonomy in risk management. Either way, the outcome could reshape how financial institutions interact with political leaders in the future. This isn't just a headline for Washington insiders. It matters to everyday people because it sets a precedent. Could banks one day use similar policies against activists, nonprofits, or even ordinary customers? That's why this case resonates far beyond Trump himself. The legal process will take time, and each new filing will keep this story alive in the media cycle. Expect more twists, more reactions, and more debates as the case unfolds. Now it's your turn. Do you see this as political punishment or simply a bank protecting itself? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your perspective adds to the conversation. And if you found this breakdown useful, hit subscribe and join us for daily USA updates. We'll keep following this story and others that shape the future of politics and finance. Stay tuned because the next headline could change everything.